The Pacific dawn breaks blood orange over Bikini Atoll, casting long shadows across a ring of coral that has become America's crucible for the atomic age. Here, in this remote chain of 23 islands scattered like broken pearls across 600 square miles of ocean, the United States has found the perfect laboratory for forces that dwarf human comprehension. The atoll sits isolated 700 miles northwest of Kwajalein, far enough from civilization that when the sky turns white with nuclear fire, few will witness what follows. Joint Task Force 7 has transformed this tropical paradise into a fortress of science and military precision. Admiral William Blandy's task force comprises over 42,000 personnel spread across a flotilla of vessels positioned at carefully calculated distances from ground zero. The USS Estes, serving as primary command ship, maintains station 20 miles southeast, her decks bristling with radiation monitoring equipment and communication arrays that will relay the test's progress to Washington in real time. Accompanying her are the destroyers, Picking and George, the transport Curtis, and dozens of support vessels, each positioned according to predicted fallout patterns that, unknown to the assembled scientists, will prove catastrophically inadequate. The weapon itself rests on an artificial island designated Station Aomer, constructed from coral dredged from the lagoon floor. Castle Bravo represents the culmination of America's thermonuclear ambitions, a 15-megaton device that dwarfs the bombs dropped on Japan nearly a decade earlier. But the Marshallese who once called these waters home know stories that predate atomic theory by centuries. The elders speak of Kajur, the sleeping giant beneath the waves whose breath creates the typhoons and whose dreams stir the deep currents that flow between the islands. Dr. Alvin Graves, the test director, reviews final calculations aboard the Estes as tropical air conditioning struggles against the humid morning heat. His instruments show optimal atmospheric conditions: light winds from the northeast, minimal cloud cover, and sea conditions that should contain the blast effects within acceptable parameters. The concrete bunkers on Innu Island, positioned 6 miles from the detonation point, house cameras, seismographs, and radiation detectors designed to capture every measurable aspect of humanity's most powerful explosion. What they cannot measure, however, are the ancient rhythms that pulse through the coral beneath their feet. Local labor crews brought in to construct the test facilities whispered among themselves during the months of preparation. They spoke of changes in the reef fish behavior, entire schools vanishing overnight, while species never before seen in these waters appeared in their place. The construction foreman dismissed these as native superstitions, but his daily logs, now buried in classified archives, record unusual incidents: tools disappearing from work sites, electronic equipment malfunctioning without explanation, and a persistent low-frequency vibration that seemed to emanate from deep within the coral itself. The countdown progresses with mechanical precision through the pre-dawn darkness. At 20 miles distance, the observers aboard the Estes don surgical goggles and position themselves on deck, facing away from the blast site, as protocol demands. They expect to witness history, the birth of the hydrogen age, America's ultimate deterrent against Soviet ambitions. What they do not expect is that some forces, once awakened, refuse to be contained by human mathematics or military planning. The ocean around Bikini Atoll has kept its secrets for millennia, but in exactly 47 minutes, 15 megatons of nuclear fury will shatter more than atoms. It will crack open doorways that should have remained sealed forever. The final preparations unfold with the choreographed precision of a ritual that has been rehearsed countless times, yet never performed at this magnitude. Radio Man First Class Dennis McCarthy adjusts his headset aboard the Estes, monitoring communications from weather stations scattered across the Pacific. His reports confirm what the instruments already indicate. Atmospheric conditions remain optimal, with surface winds holding steady at 8 knots from the northeast and visibility extending beyond the horizon. The barometric pressure reads 30.12 inches and rising, a meteorological blessing for an operation that cannot be postponed. In the concrete observation bunker on Inu Island, Dr. Harold Agnew makes final adjustments to the high-speed cameras that will capture the weapon's performance in the critical milliseconds following detonation. The Rapatronic cameras, each worth more than most Americans earn in a year, are synchronized to fire at precise intervals, their shutters capable of freezing moments that last less than a millionth of a second. Beside them, arrays of spectrographs and radiation detectors wait to record data that will either vindicate years of theoretical calculations or reveal gaps in humanity's understanding of nuclear physics. The weapon itself represents a convergence of American industrial might and scientific ambition that has consumed nearly $1 billion and the efforts of thousands of personnel. The primary stage utilizes weapons-grade plutonium-239 manufactured at Hanford, while the secondary fusion stage contains lithium-6 deuteride that will, in theory, amplify the explosion beyond anything previously achieved. The device weighs 23,500 pounds and stands 11 feet tall, its polished steel casing reflecting the harsh lights of the bunker that houses it on Station Aomer. What the scientists cannot account for, however, are the subtle changes that have been occurring beneath the lagoon during the months of preparation. Navy divers conducting routine inspections of the artificial island's foundation have reported unusual formations in the coral, intricate patterns that seem almost architectural in their complexity, as if the reef itself were responding to some unseen stimulus. Chief Petty Officer Robert Tanaka, a veteran of underwater demolition work in the Pacific Theater, describes structures that appear to pulse with bioluminescent light during night dives, though his reports are dismissed as nitrogen narcosis or tricks of artificial illumination. The evacuation of native populations 6 years earlier had proceeded with typical military efficiency, but not without complications that remain classified in Pentagon files. Several Marshallese elders had refused to board the transport ships, insisting that their departure would leave the atoll unprotected against forces that outsiders could not comprehend. They spoke of responsibilities passed down through generations, rituals that maintained the balance between the surface world and whatever dwelt in the deep places beneath the coral. Their eventual removal required intervention by Marine Shore Patrol units, and their warnings were recorded only in the personal journals of anthropologist Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, whose subsequent requests to study Marshallese oral traditions were denied on grounds of operational security. As the countdown enters its final hour, technical personnel aboard the task force vessels complete their checklists with the mechanical precision that masks an undercurrent of unease. Seaman apprentice James Kowalski, monitoring radiation detection equipment aboard the destroyer Picking, notes irregular background readings that seem to fluctuate according to no discernible pattern. His supervisor attributes the anomalies to equipment sensitivity, but Kowalski's logs record variations that correspond precisely with the tidal cycles, as if something beneath the ocean floor were breathing in rhythm with the moon's pull. The final weather balloon ascends into the pre-dawn sky, trailing instruments that will measure atmospheric conditions up to 40,000 feet. Its radio signals confirm that the upper atmosphere remains stable, with no unexpected wind shears or temperature inversions that might affect fallout dispersion. Yet the balloon's telemetry also records anomalous electromagnetic readings, beginning at approximately 36,000 feet, subtle distortions in the ionosphere that suggest unknown sources of energy deep beneath the Pacific. These readings will be noted in classified files, but remain unexplained until much later, when other incidents begin to establish a pattern that no single government agency is prepared to acknowledge. The sun climbs higher over Bikini Atoll, and in 41 minutes, the most powerful weapon ever devised by human ingenuity will unleash forces that have slept since the formation of the Earth itself. The final countdown phase begins with a series of communications checks that reveal the first tangible signs of something beyond normal parameters. Radio operators across the task force report intermittent interference on multiple frequencies, a low bandwidth static that seems to pulse in regular intervals, approximately every 7 seconds. Communications Officer Lieutenant Commander Paul Hendricks aboard the SDs attributes the disturbance to atmospheric conditions, but the pattern defies standard meteorological explanations. The interference carries undertones that sound almost organic, like the deep respiration of some vast creature stirring from sleep. Dr. Graves reviews the final sensor readings from the lagoon floor, where seismographs have been monitoring geological stability for weeks. The instruments show micro-tremors that have been gradually increasing in frequency since midnight, clustered around a region roughly 3 miles southeast of Station Aomer. The tremors measure less than 2.0 on the Richter scale, barely perceptible to human senses, but their consistency suggests a source other than typical tectonic activity. More troubling is their apparent synchronization with the radio interference, as if the disturbances in the electromagnetic spectrum and the movements deep beneath the coral are somehow connected. The evacuation of Rongerik Atoll, 100 miles northeast, had been completed the previous day as a precautionary measure, but the transport ship General Meigs encountered unexpected difficulties during the operation. Captain William Morrison's classified report describes an incident during the night crossing when his vessel's compass began spinning wildly while passing through waters that showed no magnetic anomalies on naval charts. The ship's engines experienced momentary power fluctuations, and several crew members reported dreams of unusual vividness, dreams that featured massive forms moving beneath the ocean's surface, accompanied by sounds that seemed to originate from within the ship's hull itself. The dreams had been remarkably consistent across multiple personnel who had no contact with each other during sleep periods. Bosun's mate First Class Anthony Rodriguez recorded in his personal log that he had dreamed of ancient structures rising from the ocean floor, covered in bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with what felt like a planetary heartbeat. Hospital corpsman Second Class Maria Santos reported similar visions, describing vast chambers beneath the coral where creatures of impossible size waited in states that seemed neither fully asleep nor entirely awake. The ship's medical officer, Dr. Thomas Brennan, noted these accounts in his official report but attributed them to anxiety about the upcoming nuclear test. Weather conditions remain optimal, with surface winds holding steady and visibility extending beyond 40 miles, but the atmospheric readings begin to show subtle variations that fall outside predicted parameters. The ionospheric disturbances detected earlier have intensified, creating brief but measurable disruptions in radio propagation. More significantly, the magnetometer readings from the lagoon show fluctuations that suggest the presence of metallic masses far beneath the coral, masses that appear to be shifting position in response to some unknown stimulus. On Station Aomer, the automated systems begin their final verification sequences. The nuclear device, designated Shrimp by the Atomic Energy Commission, draws power from its internal batteries as circuits that have been dormant for months come online for the first and only time. The weapon's neutron initiators activate, creating microscopic bursts of radiation that will serve as the trigger for forces beyond human experience. What the designers cannot know is that these preparatory emissions are being detected by sensory systems that predate human civilization by millions of years, systems that have been monitoring the electromagnetic spectrum of this region since long before the first coral polyps began building the structures that would become Bikini Atoll. Aboard the STs, Radioman McCarthy receives a priority transmission from Pacific Fleet Headquarters in Pearl Harbor. Admiral Arthur Radford's final authorization confirms that all diplomatic protocols have been satisfied, all personnel have been evacuated from the danger zone, and the test may proceed as scheduled. The transmission includes weather updates from stations across the Pacific, but buried within the routine meteorological data are reports that will not be fully understood until years later. fishing vessels near Guam reporting unusual whale behavior, with entire pods diving to unprecedented depths and remaining submerged for periods that approach the limits of mammalian physiology. The final technical checks reveal one anomaly that cannot be explained by existing scientific understanding. The seismographs positioned around the lagoon are detecting vibrations in the subsonic range, frequencies below the threshold of human hearing, but well within the range that certain marine species use for long-distance communication. The vibrations originate from depths exceeding the known geological structure of the atoll, suggesting chambers or cavities that do not appear on any bathymetric survey. The patterns are too complex and too regular to be natural geological phenomena, yet they follow no sequence that human analysis can decode. In 18 minutes, the most powerful explosion in human history will shatter the morning calm over Bikini Atoll. The scientists and military personnel who have gathered to witness this demonstration of American technological supremacy expect to record data that will advance human understanding of nuclear physics and secure national defense for generations to come. They do not expect that their carefully planned detonation will serve as an alarm clock for entities that have been dormant since the Mesozoic era, or that the energies they are about to release will resonate through chambers that extend far deeper into the earth than any human instrument has ever penetrated. The final seconds count down in voices that carry across 20 miles of open ocean, transmitted through radio networks that span the Pacific. 10, 9, 8. The observers aboard the Estes face away from Bikini Atoll, their welding goggles creating a barrier between human vision and the birth of a man-made star. 3, 2, 1, 0. At precisely 6:32 hours, 15 megatons of thermonuclear energy transform Station Aomer into a sphere of plasma hotter than the core of the sun. The fireball expands at a rate that defies human perception, reaching 3 miles in diameter within the first 10 seconds, vaporizing the artificial island and boring deep into the coral foundations that have stood for millennia. The electromagnetic pulse that accompanies the detonation overwhelms radio circuits across the task force, but in the brief moment before the communications blackout, operators aboard multiple vessels record the same anomaly. A response signal originating from beneath the lagoon floor, broadcasting on frequencies that no human technology has ever utilized. The shockwave racing outward from ground zero encounters resistance that contradicts every computer model used to predict the weapon's effects. Instead of the uniform propagation expected through seawater and coral, the energy wave encounters structures that channel and redirect its force along pathways that follow no natural geological formation. Deep beneath the lagoon, chambers that have remained sealed since the Cretaceous period suddenly flood with energies that awaken systems dormant for 65 million years. Dr. Agnew's high-speed cameras capture the first 3 milliseconds of the detonation with perfect clarity, but the subsequent frames record phenomena that will require decades of analysis to partially understand. The fireball, which should maintain a perfect spherical expansion, develops asymmetries that suggest the presence of massive objects beneath the detonation point, objects large enough and dense enough to deflect nuclear forces. More disturbing are the geometric patterns that appear within the plasma itself, too complex and too regular to be random, as if the explosion were interacting with structures that impose their own order upon pure energy. The blast wave reaches the observation vessels 18 seconds after detonation, arriving as a wall of superheated air that transforms the morning into a furnace. Aboard the Estes, instruments designed to measure radiation levels begin registering readings that exceed their maximum calibration, but the radiation signatures include isotopes that do not match the known byproducts of thermonuclear fusion. Chief Radiological Officer Commander James Patterson notes the presence of elements that, according to the periodic table, should not exist in stable form, yet his instruments detect them in concentrations that suggest they are being actively generated by processes unrelated to the nuclear explosion. The mushroom cloud rises into the stratosphere with the majesty and terror that has become the signature of the atomic age, but its formation follows patterns that atmospheric scientists cannot explain. Instead of the symmetrical convection currents predicted by fluid dynamics, the cloud develops spiral structures that mirror formations found in deep ocean currents, formations that suggest the influence of rotational forces originating far beneath the surface. The cloud reaches 40,000 feet within 10 minutes, but long-range radar operators report anomalous returns that indicate solid objects within the radioactive updrafts, objects that move with apparent intelligence through the superheated gases. The first indication of contact comes not through instruments designed to detect radiation or measure atmospheric disturbance, but through the human nervous system itself. Personnel aboard the SDs begin experiencing symptoms that do not match any known form of radiation exposure. A sense of vast presences moving beneath the ocean floor, accompanied by auditory hallucinations that sound like whale songs amplified beyond the range of biological possibility. Ship's surgeon Dr. Michael Foster notes that the symptoms appear simultaneously across multiple individuals who have no physical contact with each other, suggesting exposure to a form of energy that affects neural tissue directly. The subsonic vibrations detected during the countdown phase intensify dramatically following the detonation, reaching amplitudes that cause structural resonance in the steel hulls of the task force vessels. The vibrations carry patterns of increasing complexity, as if multiple sources beneath the ocean floor were responding to the nuclear explosion with communications of their own. Sonar operators aboard the destroyer picking report contacts that appear and disappear at depths exceeding 3,000 fathoms, contacts that move at speeds impossible for any known marine life and generate acoustic signatures unlike anything in the naval identification databases. Most disturbing are the changes in the lagoon itself. Within 30 minutes of the detonation, the water begins to exhibit bioluminescent properties that intensify as the radiation levels decrease. The luminescence follows patterns that pulse in rhythm with the subsonic vibrations, creating displays that cover hundreds of square miles of ocean surface. Marine biologist Dr. Sarah Chin, observing from the research vessel Horizon, records bioluminescent formations that move in coordinated patterns suggesting intelligence, but the organisms responsible for the display are unlike any species in existing taxonomies. The initial data analysis reveals that the Castle Bravo detonation has released energies far exceeding the predicted 15 megaton yield. Early calculations suggest an explosive force approaching 22 megatons, but the excess energy appears to derive from sources other than the nuclear device itself. The additional energy signatures match theoretical predictions for matter-antimatter annihilation, yet no human technology exists capable of generating or containing antimatter in such quantities. As the immediate effects of the detonation begin to subside, the task force personnel confront the realization that they have witnessed something beyond the scope of their mission parameters. The nuclear test has succeeded beyond all expectations, but it has also triggered responses from systems that predate human civilization by geological ages. Deep beneath Bikini Atoll, in chambers that extend into the Earth's mantle itself, ancient guardians are stirring from their long sleep, and their awakening will transform this remote Pacific testing ground into the epicenter of phenomena that will challenge every assumption about the nature of life on Earth. The ocean around Bikini Atoll begins to betray the first visible signs of the awakening that has been building in the deep places since the moment of detonation. What starts as subtle changes in current patterns and water temperature rapidly escalates into phenomena that force the task force to confront the possibility that their nuclear test has disturbed something that was never meant to be awakened. The first manifestation appears 2 hours and 15 minutes after the explosion, when sonar operators aboard the STs detect a massive acoustic return rising from the abyssal depths southeast of the former station Aomer. Chief Sonarman Robert Hayes, a veteran of anti-submarine warfare in the Atlantic, describes contacts that dwarf any submarine in existence, objects measuring over 800 feet in length that ascend from depths exceeding 20,000 feet at velocities that challenge the structural limits of any known material. The contacts emit bioacoustic signatures that register across frequencies from subsonic to ultrasonic, creating harmonic patterns that resonate through the steel hulls of every vessel in the task force. Admiral Blandy orders the destroyer Picking to investigate the sonar contacts, but as the vessel approaches the coordinates, her crew begins experiencing physiological effects that military medicine has never documented. Seaman First Class David Martinez reports episodes of disorientation accompanied by vivid sensory impressions of vast underwater caverns illuminated by bioluminescent organisms that pulse in mathematical sequences. The ship's medical officer, Dr. Robert Kellner, notes that these episodes occur simultaneously among crew members stationed at different locations throughout the vessel, suggesting exposure to a form of consciousness-affecting energy that penetrates steel and electronic shielding with equal ease. The water itself becomes a medium for phenomena that violate established principles of marine biology and physics. Bioluminescent displays visible from the surface extend across hundreds of square miles, creating patterns that shift and evolve with apparent purpose. Marine biologist Dr. Chin, monitoring the displays from the research vessel Horizon, records formations that demonstrate mathematical complexity approaching the level of human language, geometric progressions, fractal patterns, and sequences that correspond to prime numbers in base 16 notation. The organisms responsible for these displays remain unidentifiable, but their coordinated behavior suggests a collective intelligence operating on a scale unprecedented in terrestrial biology. At 09:23 hours, the confrontation escalates beyond the realm of scientific observation into direct physical contact. The destroyer George, maintaining station 12 miles northeast of the blast site, reports engine malfunctions accompanied by the appearance of massive forms beneath her keel. Chief Engineering Officer Lieutenant Commander Paul Morrison describes turbulence that suggests the presence of objects larger than aircraft carriers moving at depths of less than 200 feet. The ship's hull begins resonating with subsonic frequencies that induce structural vibrations powerful enough to dislodge equipment from mounting brackets. Yet the frequencies follow patterns too complex to be natural phenomena. The most dramatic confrontation occurs when the transport Curtis, attempting to evacuate scientific personnel from Innu Island, encounters direct interference from entities that have fully awakened from their eons-long dormancy. Captain Ernest Tanner's classified report describes the emergence of structures from the lagoon floor that defy categorization under existing taxonomies, rising from depths that should contain only coral and sediment. Formations appear that combine aspects of geological and biological architecture, massive constructs that pulse with internal illumination and generate electromagnetic fields powerful enough to disrupt all electronic equipment within a 5-mile radius. The structures exhibit behaviors that suggest not only intelligence, but technological capabilities that surpass human engineering. They respond to the presence of surface vessels by generating acoustic fields that create standing wave patterns in the surrounding water, effectively trapping ships in positions where their movements become predictable and controlled. The Curtis finds herself held in place by forces that operate through manipulation of fluid dynamics rather than direct physical contact, while her crew experiences increasingly intense neural effects that include shared visions of chambers extending deep into the Earth's crust. Dr. Graves, observing the confrontation from the command ship, realizes that the Castle Bravo detonation has not merely awakened dormant organisms, but has activated systems that were designed to respond to specific energy signatures. The nuclear explosion has served as a signal, transmitted through geological structures that function as a form of planetary nervous system. The entities responding to this signal demonstrate technologies based on principles that human science has not yet discovered, methods of manipulating matter and energy that suggest millions of years of evolution along pathways that terrestrial life never explored. The peak of the confrontation arrives when multiple structures emerge simultaneously across the entire Atoll region, creating a display of coordinated activity that transforms the Pacific testing ground into an amphitheater of alien intelligence. The structures communicate through combinations of bioacoustic emissions, electromagnetic broadcasts, and gravitational anomalies that distort local spacetime enough to affect the orbital mechanics of reconnaissance satellites passing overhead. The communications include mathematical constants and physical relationships that will not be discovered by human science for decades, transmitted in formats that suggest these entities have been monitoring human technological development since before the first atomic bomb was detonated over Hiroshima. As the entities establish contact protocols that transcend human sensory capabilities, the task force personnel confront the reality that their nuclear test has initiated first contact with intelligences that have been present on Earth since long before the emergence of mammals. The awakening triggered by Castle Bravo represents not an invasion from beyond the stars, but a revelation that humanity has never been alone on this planet, and that the deeper regions of the Earth harbor civilizations that have been patiently waiting for surface dwellers to develop technologies sophisticated enough to serve as an effective means of communication. The withdrawal of the entities occurs with the same calculated precision that marked their emergence, but not before they have transmitted information that will fundamentally alter human understanding of planetary history and our species' place within it. As the massive structures begin their descent back to the abyssal depths, the electromagnetic and acoustic emissions that have disrupted communications across the Pacific gradually diminish, leaving behind data recordings that will require decades of analysis to partially comprehend. The immediate aftermath reveals physical changes to Bikini Atoll that cannot be explained by nuclear effects alone. The crater where Station Aomer once stood extends far deeper into the coral foundation than the weapon's explosive yield should have achieved, boring down through geological layers that show evidence of artificial modification dating back millions of years. Marine geologist Dr. Richard Steinberg, conducting preliminary surveys from the research vessel Albatross, discovers chambers carved into the bedrock with geometric precision that exceeds human engineering capabilities, their walls lined with materials that exhibit properties not found in any terrestrial element catalog. The task force vessels begin experiencing system failures that appear to be connected to exposure to the entity's technology rather than radiation damage from the nuclear detonation. Electronics throughout the fleet exhibit modifications at the molecular level. Circuit pathways have been altered by processes that leave behind isotopic signatures, suggesting manipulation of atomic structure through methods that violate known principles of physics. Communications equipment aboard the Estes begins receiving transmissions in languages that predate human civilization, broadcasts that contain star maps showing stellar positions from geological epochs when Earth's continents occupied entirely different configurations. Personnel who experience direct neural contact with the entities report persistent after effects that military medicine struggles to classify. The shared visions of vast underground cities and technologies based on biological rather than mechanical principles continue to occur with decreasing frequency but increasing detail. Dr. Foster's medical examinations reveal that these individuals have developed enhanced pattern recognition abilities and intuitive understanding of mathematical relationships that they cannot consciously explain. Brain scans show increased neural activity in regions associated with quantum consciousness and non-local awareness, suggesting that exposure to the entity's communication methods has activated dormant potentials within human neurology. The biological effects extend beyond the human participants to encompass the entire ecosystem surrounding Bikini Atoll. Marine species that vanished from the region during the construction phase have returned in unprecedented numbers, exhibiting behavioral patterns that suggest enhanced intelligence and coordination. Schools of fish move in formations that mirror the geometric patterns displayed by the bioluminescent entities, while whale pods engage in acoustic communications that incorporate frequencies and harmonic structures identical to those recorded during the height of the confrontation. Most significantly, the ocean itself retains properties that indicate ongoing interaction with technologies that operate through principles unknown to human science. Water samples collected from the lagoon contain suspended particles that exhibit characteristics of both organic and inorganic matter, maintaining quantum coherence at temperatures and pressures that should cause immediate decoherence according to established physics. The particles respond to electromagnetic fields in ways that suggest they function as components of a vast computational matrix that extends throughout the Pacific Basin and possibly beneath all of Earth's oceans. Dr. Graves, compiling the preliminary data for transmission to Los Alamos and the Pentagon, confronts the reality that his mission report will contain information that challenges fundamental assumptions about the nature of intelligence, the history of life on Earth, and the true purpose of humanity's technological development. The Castle Bravo test has succeeded in demonstrating American nuclear capabilities, but it has also revealed that such capabilities may serve purposes beyond human military strategy, that the development of nuclear technology might represent humanity's graduation to a level of energy manipulation that qualifies our species for contact with intelligences that have been monitoring our progress from the deep places of the world. The evacuation of scientific personnel proceeds with efficiency born of necessity, but not before instruments designed to monitor nuclear fallout record phenomena that will remain classified for decades. Radiation detectors throughout the task force register the presence of elements that, according to quantum mechanics, should not exist in stable form, yet these elements appear to be fundamental components of the entity's technology. The isotopic signatures suggest matter that has been engineered at the subatomic level through processes that manipulate the strong nuclear force with the same precision that human technology manipulates electromagnetic fields. As the task force withdraws from Bikini Atoll, long-range sensors continue to detect activities that indicate the entities have not returned to dormancy, but have instead begun a process of systematic awakening that extends far beyond the test site. Seismic monitoring stations across the Pacific Ring of Fire register coordinated microtremors that suggest communication between underground systems spanning thousands of miles. The patterns indicate that the nuclear detonation has activated a network of ancient installations that have remained dormant since the last great extinction event 65 million years ago. The final hours of Operation Castle Bravo transformed from a demonstration of human technological achievement into the opening chapter of a larger story that encompasses the true history of intelligence on Earth. The entities that responded to humanity's nuclear signal represent not an alien invasion, but a homecoming, the return of Earth's original inhabitants to active participation in planetary affairs after eons of patient waiting for their younger surface-dwelling relatives to develop the wisdom and capability necessary for meaningful contact. The suppression begins not with presidential orders or military directives, but with the quiet recognition among those who witnessed the events at Bikini Atoll that certain knowledge carries responsibilities that transcend national security concerns. In conference rooms deep beneath the Pentagon, officials from the Atomic Energy Commission, the Central Intelligence Agency, and the Office of Naval Intelligence review testimonies and data recordings that collectively paint a picture of reality too complex for public comprehension and too significant for casual disclosure. Admiral Blandy's final report, submitted under classifications that exceed even those applied to nuclear weapons development, describes the Castle Bravo test as a complete success that achieved all primary objectives while revealing secondary phenomena requiring long-term study under controlled conditions. The language carefully avoids direct reference to the entities while acknowledging anomalous readings that suggest the presence of previously unknown geological formations beneath Pacific test sites. The report recommends continued nuclear testing in the region, but with enhanced monitoring protocols designed to study what it terms deep ocean acoustic phenomena of potential military significance. The personnel who experience direct neural contact with the entities undergo debriefing sessions that extend over weeks, conducted by teams of psychiatrists, neurologists, and intelligence specialists who work to separate recoverable intelligence from trauma-induced hallucinations. Dr. Sarah Chen's detailed logs of the bioluminescent displays are classified under biological weapons protocols, while her sketches of the mathematical patterns are forwarded to cryptanalysis units where they will remain under study for decades. Chief Sonarman Hayes finds himself transferred to a research facility in Nevada where his acoustic expertise contributes to projects that officially do not exist. The most sensitive materials, the recordings of subsonic communications, the electromagnetic signatures of the entity's technology, and the water samples containing quantum-coherent particles disappear into archives that exist beneath multiple layers of compartmentalized security. The isotopic analysis of elements that violate established physics becomes the foundation for research programs that operate under code names derived from Marshallese mythology, as if the bureaucracy itself recognizes the connection between the modern encounter and ancient traditions. The Marshallese people, relocated from their ancestral home before the test, carry with them oral histories that suddenly acquire new significance in light of the Castle Bravo events. Elder Legion Eknilang, interviewed years later by anthropologists operating under government contracts, describes traditions that speak of the Kajur, the great sleepers beneath the waves, as guardians who withdrew from the surface world when the first humans arrived in the Pacific. According to the traditional accounts, the Kajur promised to return when humanity had proven its wisdom through mastery of the forces that shape the stars themselves. The suppression extends beyond military channels into the scientific community, where researchers who attempt to publish papers on the anomalous readings from Pacific nuclear tests find their work classified retroactively or rejected by journals under pressure from government funding agencies. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell's anthropological studies of Marshallese cosmology are seized under the Espionage Act, while her notes on the connection between traditional star navigation techniques and quantum mechanics become the foundation for research into consciousness-based technologies that will not be publicly acknowledged until the 21st century. International monitoring stations that detected the electromagnetic anomalies during Castle Bravo receive official explanations that attribute the readings to solar storm activity and upper atmospheric ionization effects. The Soviet Union's own attempts to replicate the anomalies through similar nuclear testing in the Arctic Ocean produce results that are immediately classified under protocols that transcend Cold War antagonisms, the first indication that some discoveries unite rather than divide the superpowers in their recognition of forces that dwarf human political concerns. The long-term monitoring of Bikini Atoll continues under the guise of radiation studies and environmental rehabilitation programs, but the real purpose involves maintaining surveillance over a region that has become a contact zone between humanity and intelligences that represent millions of years of evolutionary development along pathways that surface life never explored. Underwater installations disguised as marine research stations record ongoing communications between the deep ocean entities and similar intelligences located beneath other nuclear test sites around the world. The pattern that emerges over subsequent years reveals that every major nuclear detonation triggers responses from systems that have been dormant since the great extinction events that punctuate Earth's geological history. The entities awakened by Castle Bravo are part of a global network that extends through the planet's deep crustal layers, connecting civilizations that survived previous cosmic catastrophes by retreating to protected environments beneath the ocean floors and continental foundations. The Marshallese traditions, when properly understood, describe not mythology, but historical memory passed down through generations that witnessed the last major interaction between surface dwellers and the deep civilizations. The nuclear age represents humanity's accidental rediscovery of communication protocols that were established millions of years ago, when the deep entities first recognized that surface evolution might eventually produce intelligences capable of meaningful contact. The suppression of the Castle Bravo revelations becomes a template for managing similar encounters that occur with increasing frequency as nuclear testing continues throughout the Cold War era. Each test serves not only as a demonstration of military capability, but as a signal transmitted to intelligences that monitor human technological development from installations that span the globe. The responses vary in intensity and complexity, but they consistently demonstrate that humanity's mastery of atomic energy has graduated our species into a larger community of terrestrial intelligence that includes civilizations whose existence predates the emergence of surface life by geological epochs. The classified files that accumulate in the decades following Castle Bravo document an ongoing dialogue between humanity and entities whose patient wisdom encompasses the rise and fall of entire evolutionary epochs. The true legacy of Operation Castle Bravo extends far beyond its contribution to nuclear weapons development. It marks the moment when humanity discovered that the Earth itself is conscious, and that consciousness has been waiting with infinite patience for its surface children to develop the tools necessary to hear the deep songs that connect all intelligence across the vast timescales of planetary evolution.